If you call your brother an SOB, then aren't you just insulting your mom? And if you insult your mom, aren't you just insulting yourself and not your brother? Welcome everybody back to another episode of Arrow Discussions. We are talking about episode 20 of season 4 called Genesis. This one's mostly dealing with Andy Diggle and John Diggle. And we will talk about that. We will talk about their relationship and what this episode is supposedly about. See, the show does this now, both in season 3 and in season 4 right now, and Flash is doing this right now in their second season, and Legends was just always doing it. The foundation of where we are now is so unbelievably weak that at this point, when everything is supposed to be coming to a head, when we're supposed to be getting payoffs to setups, because that foundation is just unbelievably bad, none of this plays. So this episode on its own is just nothing. This episode is purely there to cash in on the setups of the previous episodes, and because none of those made any sense whatsoever, this episode is just nothing. So there's two ways to approach this, and the first way is to be unbelievably angry at every little thing about this episode, because every little thing is in reference to something else that just doesn't make any sense. The other way is to just look at this episode as an episode of television, and that is the calm way. And the calm way would also require this video to only be 2 minutes long. And so let me start with the second way. Let me start with the second way by saying that this episode starts, and there's talking, and people are moving around and shooting things and making out, and stuff's going down. And yeah, I don't care about any of it. That's the first way. Now, the second way is not all that different. It's just I'm going to expound on this with more rage. So, okay, first 2 seasons of Arrow, right? First 2 seasons first one was all about Oliver going around just murdering people with his arrows. And then second season was building to, okay, maybe I shouldn't kill, and then maybe I do, and then maybe I kind of do, and then third season's like, I will indiscriminately kill except when the writers tell me I'm supposed to feel bad about it. And then season 4 is again, I will indiscriminately kill unless I'm supposed to feel bad about it for the context of the story that we're trying to tell, as opposed to any actual natural character growth. And so this episode deals with that choice, except it's not from Oliver's perspective, it's from Diggle's. And you'd think this would be interesting, right? You'd think it'd be really fun to see a sidekick deal with the hero's main moral dilemma and get a new perspective on it, since they are 2 separate people. And because it's Arrow, it's not interesting. It's not interesting at all. What happens here is, because of what happened with Damien Dark in the past and what happened to Laurel, Diggle's wife has just been going around on this truck that is this secret Argus bunker with her daughter, and it just drives around Star City all day, and every now and then Diggle comes to visit them, and it's just kind of a hideout, and it's kind of a clever hideout. It's fun. It's not practical whatsoever, but it's kind of fun. It's comic booky. And so because of that hideout situation, there's something that she has that Damien Dark needs, and so he uses Andy Diggle to attack Diggle, to lead Andy Diggle to Diggle's wife, who then has Damien Dark show up so he can take a thing from Diggle's wife. Now, the main conflict here from Diggle's perspective is that Andy is someone that he thought was lost, and then he found him, and so he wanted to give him every opportunity, every chance to be the person that he used to know. Now, issue here is the person that we are told about in the first 3 seasons of Arrow and the person that is revealed that Andy was in the 4th season are in no way consistent. So we just have to chop off the first 3 seasons and pretend like they didn't happen. And so instead, we have to deal with the flashbacks of who Andy is for the sake of this season, and Diggle's options as to whether or not to trust him this season, and then go to the episode where Laurel dies, and we find out that Andy Diggle has been evil the whole time. And so here, Diggle has a choice. Because his family is hiding, and because his daughter isn't safe, and his wife isn't safe, he must decide what to do about Andy Diggle. And the moral dilemma is whether or not he should kill him, because ultimately Andy Diggle is never going to stop. And there is some really atrocious dialogue, like I mean spectacularly atrocious dialogue, when Andy and John are talking to each other, trying to rationalize whatever the hell is going on in this episode. There's these moments where John is like, family, family, family. And then Andy's like, no family, no family, no family. And then John's like, no family, no family, no family. And Andy's like, family, family, family. Like, it's like they're just saying things. It's like, okay, I love The Karate Kid. I think The Karate Kid is an awesome movie. Doesn't completely hold up, but I love it. And The Karate Kid has that famous song, You're the Best. And if you actually listen to the lyrics of You're the Best, it's just a series of cliches. That's really all it is. I mean, it's a catchy tune and I like it a lot, but it really is just a series of cliche statements that are formed into one long song. And that's exactly what's going on with the conversation between Andy and John. They are just spouting cliches. The difference, though, is at least the song uses cliches that are consistent. These are cliches that are just arbitrarily assigned to the characters to spew, whether or not they make sense at all. And so the dialogue doesn't make any sense, and because I can't discern what the dialogue is supposed to tell me, the character motivations don't make any sense. And so by the end of the episode, we have this final confrontation between the two, and Andy's like, I will never stop, and your family will never be safe, and your wife is going to have to raise your daughter, and she's not going to be able to go to school because she's going to be living in a truck. And then John just shoots him in the chest, and he's dead. So, you know, all that, the setup between who Andy Diggle used to be and who Andy Diggle is now, and the brotherly relationship, and whether or not they can reconcile, and the fact that Andy had a family that we just conveniently forget and remember whenever the plot needs us to. Yeah, it's all gone. Doesn't matter. It was just there for padding. He's dead now. And John feels bad about it. And I don't know why he feels bad about it. Because these are people that indiscriminately kill, except when the plot needs them not to. And so I guess John just feels bad because the plot says he should. And the relationship between his brother is just there to give us some cheesy drama. Now, there were some really, really interesting ideas in what's being done here. I mean, come on. We're doing superheroes, we're doing modern mythology. How many cases of modern mythology, or not modern, but just classical mythology, can you think of where there are two brothers that are at war with each other? Just in your mind, think back to literally every story that involved two brothers fighting each other, right? The founding of Rome, ancient Greek stuff, Cain and Abel, like there's just, at least I think it's Cain and Abel, I'm not sure, I'm not a biblical guy, but there are tons of stories where brothers are at war with each other. And all Arrow had to do is try and copy one of them. And you know what it did instead? It just ended up making cheesy drama to the point where the fact that Andy and John are brothers doesn't even matter. Like, there's nothing about the relationship that necessitates them being brothers. And maybe there would have been if we could, glue seasons 1 through 3 back on and talk about Andy as John remembered him in those seasons, as opposed to the weird retcon flashbacks within this season. But no, we don't do that. And you know what? To give this season credit, if you wanted to go with what this season set up with John and Andy's relationship, if you wanted to talk about the training of soldiers and the psychological issues and the drifting apart and the return to normalcy after being disciplined in a certain way, if you wanted to go that way, there was so much you could talk about, and you just don't. So that's the whole thing with Andy and John. All of it is just awful. It doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't play with the rest of the season. This is supposed to be a big payoff to something that is horribly set up, and the payoff itself is horribly handled. Now, the other thing here is Oliver goes on a sort of mystical quest. Basically what happens is that because John Constantine was in earlier episode of the season, and he gave Oliver a tattoo in the flashbacks, here in this season, Oliver, or the present day, I mean, there are no flashbacks in this episode, by the way. Thank God there are no flashbacks. So Oliver heard from John Constantine, and John, we don't actually get a cameo. We just basically hear what John said. We just basically understand through Oliver what John says. And John's like, you should go check out this friend I have who can help you stop Damien Dark. And so Oliver's like, yeah, I'm going to go do that. So he and Felicity go and check out this old casino where they meet this mystical woman who is an immortal and is going to teach Oliver how to take out Damien Dark. And what we have here is that Damien Dark doesn't get his powers from the idol. His powers are like focused because of the idol, or like enhanced by it, or something like along those lines. Like the idol is not the inherent form of the power. That the idol is just like a channeling mechanism of some kind. And Damien Dark gets his powers from death, because that's not cliche. And what you have to do in order to beat him is draw strength from light. And obviously, not cliche at all, Oliver has to channel the light inside him in order to diffuse the power of Damien Dark's darkness. And, okay, cliche, whatever. And what we're supposed to get here is we're supposed to get the payoff to this entire season, or as the creators would tell you, this entire series of what Oliver has been going through. About, is he dark? Is he light? Is he a good person? Is he a bad person? Has the island changed him? Has it not? Who is he? Right? That's been like the sort of mission statement, thesis statement of this season, of this series. And this is supposed to be the payoff. This is supposed to be the moment where, or at least these final few episodes are supposed to build on that. This is supposed to be the moment where we address head on that, okay, this is about who Oliver is inside. And we get this interesting flashback of all the people that have died while in front of Oliver, and the reason he's so screwed up in the head. And it's supposed to be like this really interesting moment of reflection. It's supposed to be this moment where we kind of get inside Oliver's psyche and we kind of understand where he's coming from. And it doesn't do that. What it actually does is reminds us of every single time Oliver has already supposedly learned this lesson and then conveniently forgot it. That's really all it does. We flash back to the death of Tommy, which is supposed to make it so Oliver doesn't kill, but then he does anyway. We flash back to the death of his mother, which is supposed to teach him that regardless of who dies, he needs to be a good person, which he conveniently forgets. We flash back to the death of Oliver's father, which created the darkness in him to begin with, but was, mitigated by what happened later with Tommy. Like, all of these flashbacks are just there to remind us that Oliver has been going in circles for whenever the show needs him to go in circles. And so the whole dark versus light theme doesn't really work, and the literal manifestation of it through the magic is cliche, but it could be interesting, and it ultimately isn't. And so Oliver can't channel magic. He tries it once and he gets it, then he tries it again and it doesn't work. And then when Damien Dark attacks Lila, Oliver shows up to take out Damien Dark, and there, in that moment, he thinks about all of his friends' voices, and he's able to push Damien Dark back, and he wins the day. Now, this is another one of those moments in Arrow where there is a scene in between that the show is not going to show us. There is a scene that should be between Oliver realizing that he's not going to be able to beat Damien Dark because he's too dark in the inside, and when Oliver is able to bring out the light and beat Damien Dark. There should be a moment where there is some internalization of that conflict and he comes out on one side. And that scene is not here, and we're supposed to just be like, oh man, you thought this was happening, but now this is happening, and oh man, it blows my mind because it's a twist. And it's not. It's not at all. It's shock value. It's gimmicky shock value. And so Oliver wins the day, and it's whatever. You're supposed to feel things. You're supposed to be enthralled by this. You're supposed to be getting emotional, but ultimately none of it makes any sense. And then you connect it all back to the last two episodes where Laurel died, and Felicity is like, go ahead and murder Damien Dark, and yet Oliver is like, you're the one who gives me hope and gives me light. But she's not. I don't know about you, but if an inner voice is telling me to murder someone, it's probably not the angel on the shoulder. Just saying. So that ultimately completely falls apart, and the only thing of consequence that we should acknowledge from this episode is what Damien Dark takes from Lila and what happens to Thea. So what Damien Dark takes from Lila is this Rubicon thing, this chip that she surgically inserted into her skin that Damien Dark wanted earlier, that Spiral wanted earlier, and what this does is that it's like a missile defense program, and including the US, every country in the world, if they launch any sort of missile attack, this thing is supposed to be able to stop it, but you can reverse engineer it in order to make it so that all of the missiles fire. And this is Genesis. This is what's supposed to happen, is that Damien Dark's going to use this to fire missiles all over the place and eradicate the population and then start again, Genesis. And there's kind of like an ark, like a Noah's Ark, which is this tiny domed, almost Truman Show civilization where Thea and Alex are hanging out, and this is where all of the survivors, or the people that are deemed worthy of living past into the new world, are going to stay. And interesting idea, right? Like it's the Age of Ultron thing. It's the idea that, is humanity a thing that's worth saving, or should you start again? And ultimately none of it really works because those themes aren't set up throughout the season. Now, this is a big reveal as to what Genesis is about, but because I don't actually care about Damien Dark, because I don't understand his plan, because all this season has done is vaguely throw that word at us, none of this really means anything. And that's ultimately what this boils down to, is when you have a season that is all about setups, and then you get to the segment of the season that's supposed to start the payoffs. When the setups are this bad, and when the payoffs don't register with you because the setups are this bad, then you are left with one central question. And that central question is, why should I care? Why should I care about Thea and Alex's relationship? Why should I care about Andy and Diggle's weird relationship? Why should I care about Oliver and Felicity's non-relationship? Why should I care if Damien Dark decides to blow the entire planet up because it's already filled with people I don't care about? That's the problem with this, right? Like, compare this to Age of Ultron. Again, the reason Ultron's blowing up of the Earth matters more than just in the abstract sense of you shouldn't blow people up is that we got to see normalcy. We got to see a Hawkeye's farm. We got to see normal people living their lives, and that is what you are fighting against. What we have in Arrow is a bunch of insane people in costumes that can't seem to remember what happened to them a couple of days ago and yet keep trying to move forward, stopping a guy that's just going to wipe all the confusion out. So I don't really know who I should be rooting for, and I'm having a really hard time being interested in anything that's going on. Arrow has become this show where I enjoy reviewing it because I get to make fun of it, and I get to make sarcastic comments, and I get to be quippy, and I get to just like poke holes all over the place, and I really want to like it. This is a show I liked a lot the first couple seasons. Every time an episode comes on, in my mind, I have this denial state where I'm like, okay, this is the episode that's going to sweep everything else under the rug and bring us back to form. And it never happens. And so rather than being quippy and fun about everything that's wrong with the show now, we are to the stage of this show where there's just nothing to talk about, where there's just nothing interesting to deal with, where there's just nothing going on. And as much as this show is trying to advance this plot forward, because I don't actually care about any of the characters, it doesn't matter. Now, I'm complaining a lot here, but I should note that the real champion in this TV season, the real hero that deserves a medal for all of their effort covering insanity, is Eric. Because no matter how much I don't care about this show, at least it's not causing me to have a mental breakdown like Eric in Gotham. So, with that said, that is Genesis. That is this weird non-episode of Arrow from this week. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with anything I said. If you think this season can be salvaged, because I'm always going to think that. I'm always going to go to the next episode hoping that this season can be salvaged. And maybe I am just hopelessly optimistic, or a moron, or both, in thinking that. But maybe there's someone else out there that's thinking that next week the show can recover. I don't know. Maybe it can. What are your predictions for the end of the season? What's going to happen? There was some talk about who the big bad of Arrow Season 5 is going to be. Let me know what you guys think of that in the comments. And also, a big celebratory note for the fact that there are no flashbacks in this episode. And that makes me happy. So, thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.